small swimsuit tutorial. This time we're going to be looking at the bottom portion of the swimsuit, and we'll be looking at two different designs, both a one-piece and a two-piece swimsuit. We just want to look and see how the material is going to interact with the glutes and the hips, and just kind of see what's all going on down there. So just keep in mind, I'm using Clip Studio Paint, but you can use whatever art program you have. And if you're following along with pencil and paper, just make sure that your construction lines are very, very, very light. That way, any corrections you need to make will not be visible in the finished piece. So I'm thinking we will do one where it's straight on from the back, and then another where it's at a slight angle, just so you can kind of see a little bit different curvature and positioning there. So first I'm just going to start with a center line straight up and down. I'm going to have a cross line. I'm going to move mine actually a little bit here, since we're just looking at two different ones. I kind of want them to be pretty large to work off of here. So I'll just put in a crossing line like so, and roughly the same length here. I'm going to put in two little lines. This is for the edges of the hip. Then I'll put a line here at the bottom and connect, just like what we've been doing for all of our actual figure studies. From here I will throw in my hip section here, and we can really smooth this out later. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is for our athletic character that we did earlier, so I'm kind of trying to keep the hip section here pretty sharp, just because she's at a low body fat percentage, so we're going to really see the bone poking through. From there I will mark off a little section here at the bottom, a little bit here at the top, since this is the unmovable hip. Alright, next I'll just kind of even this up slightly. My center line is kind of off anyways, so just trying to make this relatively the same size. And I'm just gonna put in a small back here. I'm gonna use these concave lines here, since this is our really thin character. I'm just gonna cut that off. And I'm going to do the same here for the legs. So let's give these a little bit of a bump, but not a lot, since she's supposed to be pretty thin. So I'm going to shape this, trying to keep the thighs wider at the top, and then they'll kind of come down. But here we go. So now we'll just draw in the glutes, and for our little placeholder here, we're just going to draw them in just like what we were doing in our previous tutorial. So you kind of want to keep it somewhat flat near the top, and then really curve at the bottom. So you're really trying to curl up right here at the base, and then keeping it relatively smooth up near the top there. So I'm just trying to make sure my hips look alright. Gonna widen this a little bit, like so. Maybe bring this one in a little bit. There. Alright, so from here we can put in our first swimsuit. So we'll probably just make this one the one-piece swimsuit. So you can make your swimsuit as small or wide, or as small as you want. So for this one, we're trying to keep her at least somewhat covered up here. Otherwise, YouTube is going to have a field day with me. So what we want to do here, though, is we want to imagine, because your glute here, it's going to be a curled structure, right? Like, it's not just flat, even though we're looking at it straight from the back. There's still mass there. It's still going to be rounded. So we kind of want to follow that shape around the glute. Something like that. And then we'll do the same over here. Now you can have it shaped like this. You could have it also shaped like this, which I guess the other way. I'll do the other way for this one. We'll shape it like so. There. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this one piece a border, because there'll be some interesting things that we can do with said border. So it's just going to be like a just pretty basic border like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep it up in here where we're over the hip. We're going to keep the line wider, and then it's going to really suck in at the bottom. So we want this bottom portion to not be as wide as on the top, and that's because we've got fat here from the glutes that are going to kind of be spilling over where this harder line is, and we'll be able to see that much more clearly in the finished like line art section. But for right now, we'll just throw all that in, and then we can just sketch out our next one. And we can also add some little like wrinkle lines in here too, just however you want it. It's up to you, but that can make it look a little bit more realistic, so you can tell that there's actually some sort of material there other than just skin. Whereas on this one, now what we're going to do is draw in a line like so, another straight line, but this time when we draw the hips, we don't want it perfectly even. The hip that's facing us, we want a little bit more space. So it needs, this part here needs to be larger than over here, because this side over here is further away from us. So it's not going to be the exact same distance. From there, we'll just draw out our little bucket shape again, like so, relatively keeping the hip still the same sort of pokiness, like so. Then we can just put in our sockets, drop the legs in. This time, even though we're at a slight angle, we're still going to see some gap there just because she's got thin thighs. Then we want to do, mark out our little section here. It's unmovable. Now we can actually drop in the glutes. So, just like before, we're going to start really, really curved at the bottom, and then flatten it out a little bit at the top. And notice how I'm coming a little bit further past my center line than I would on this one. And that's because from this angle, you're actually going to see a little bit more of the actual shape of the glute. So it's going to be a little bit longer. And we'll do that over here as well. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit. It's not that large. There we go. So we still want the bottom of the glutes to be relatively even on both sides. And then over here, we'll just draw it in like this. And we're trying to keep the glutes here a little bit small. We want them shapely but small. Then we can add in our back line, a little bit of our stomach poking through here. And we'll cut this off like so, and we'll probably just barely see the poke of the hip over there. And we'll just tidy this up a little bit. Alright, so this will be our bikini over here. So what I'm going to do is, starting from just before our hip actually like curves down, so just right in here, I'm just going to try to essentially connect that with a curving line, like so, both sides. For most like anime and manga, I don't know if it's just like a Japanese swimsuit thing, but whenever they draw them in bikinis, they always have the center line here just poking out from the top. Probably just means that you need a bigger bottom, but for some reason that's how they all do it. So since we're looking at how to draw in an anime and manga style, we are going to do that as well. So next we just want to do what we did before, just kind of establish where our little line is going to be. This time, instead of making it like this shape, I'm going to curl it like this. But I'm still going to make this section here smaller than when it reaches over here. This little border line. This one up here we can actually keep the same size. It'll be a little bit smaller over here just because we are looking from this area. So everything over here is going to be just the tiniest bit smaller since it's further away. However, from this angle, this line here is not going to be shaped like that. And you can already tell that if you draw it in like that, it looks completely wrong. It looks very odd. This will still be shaped like what we did before. Right, like that. And then we'll throw this in as well. Now this time, over here, we're keeping this relatively flat and open for the little seam line here. But this time over here, you want the widest part to be here in the middle, because this is cutting over across the glute right here. So it's going to start small, get large, before it comes down and gets small again, because it's just in the soft part of the glute, so it's going to get kind of swallowed. So now that we've got our little sketch lines in, can now do the line art. And so in the line art here, this is where a lot of the details are actually going to come through, so you can see a bit better of what's going on. So I'm just going to quick mark out my little areas here, and then we'll just do one at a time. So first, I'm just putting in my rib lines here. So this is just the meat that follows the rib portion. Put in some little back muscles. And add some little markings here so you can tell that this is cloth. Next, what I will do is I will put in my hip line, like so, on both sides, trying to keep it relatively even. From there, I can throw in my outer thighs, just trying to get that overall shape that we want, like so. Next, I will add a little seam line here and attach like this. Now we can put in the glutes. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make a new layer. If you're doing this on paper, then you're just going to have to be really accurate with your lines so you don't really spill over a whole lot. But here in a drawing program, this part is a little bit easier because we can just swoop in the line shape that we want. And remember, we're trying to keep it thinner here at the base. So I'm just going to fill this in. So we have a little seam there, and a little seam here that's rising just past the actual meat portion of our hip. So I'll just erase that. And since this is just a figure study for me, I'm not super concerned about the quality of my line art, but I definitely want to make sure that I'm keeping it cleaned up enough so you guys can actually see what it's supposed to look like. So then I will do the same over here. And again, I'm just trying to keep it wider at the top and keep it thin at the bottom. I guess I just need to start from the top here. And I'm trying to do fast, accurate lines. That keeps the lines a lot smoother and cleaner looking. That's why sometimes you just see me redoing an entire line over and over. It's just since I'm trying to go fast, so it keeps it real smooth like this, rather than do this where it's all choppy and strange looking. Just if you're not quite so accurate with it, then it can kind of mess things up. So I'll just quick clean this up. So again, this top line here is not really being swallowed by the meat because it's resting on the hip itself. So that's a pretty bony little place to sit, so it's really not going to be spilling over. However, the section all over here in the bottom is going to be a little bit different because it's on a very soft part of the glute. So, what we want to do, instead of just drawing a straight glute line like this, we're actually going to break it up and give it a little bump. So see how my glute curls in to this shape here? We want to do that on this side as well, like so. So see, it kind of comes up like this. That's because the actual meat of the glute is being pressed by this seam line, which is pretty tough. So the seam line is like a dexterous material, so when it's against something really soft and squishy, then it's going to kind of sink and get eaten by it. So that's why it stays a little bit thinner down here than it would up here where nothing's pushing it against it. So then we'll add these lines here, and then add here, and then if you want to add seam lines here across our center line, you could do that, and then you just want to make sure that through them you don't actually have the center line visible, like so. So you could throw them in like that. So we'll do now the bikini portion here. Again, I'm just gonna drop in my little areas here. And if you are trying to do this on paper, instead of just putting in your hip area right now, you'd probably want to just start with throwing in your actual seam line here, because then you can just make these meet afterwards. So we'll just do that for this one, just so you can kind of see what's going on. So, I'm gonna give this a little bump. Kind of race down this line a little bit. Then we will do the same over here, keeping it wider here at the left since this is over the hip, and then again just scrunching it down on the actual glute itself. Then we can connect those two. Then here is going to be a little bit tougher of a shape because this is going to be widest in the center, and then it's going to be tight on the bottom and the top. So we'll throw in this shape like this. That's close enough to what we want, so we're just going to run with it. So it's a little bit tighter at the top and the bottom, and that's because this time both portions of the seam that we can see are on the actual glute. So this time, instead of a straight line, I'm going to give this a little bit of a convex connection here. And that's just because the meat from the glute is kind of spilling past the seam line. And then we'll do the same on the other side. And down here, like so. Trying to keep her glutes relatively small since she's not supposed to have large glutes. So then we can add in the rest of our lines. Add our back muscles, and there we go. So that's basically what you're looking for. Remember, you can use as many of these sort of seams as you want. Try not to go too overboard. Like there's a lot more right there than what I'd like to do, but I was just trying to show you what you can do to kind of break up just the overall shape like this. But you could add little tiny ones in sections that you want. Doesn't super matter. It can be nice just to break up the shape. Other than that, just remember the overall shape of the glute, and that's kind of going to be what your seams follow. And if your swimsuit doesn't have seam line on it, that's fine. You still just want to follow that shape and just make sure that anywhere that's really squishy is going to kind of come in like this around it. So even if you had just a flat swimsuit, it's still going to be squishy. And if you can, just remember that since all of this section in here is what is being covered by a tighter material, it's still going to be squishy, but the area outside of the material is really going to spill past that little part that kind of pudges out. And that's because this part here, the meat, is just kind of being held in place by the bathing suit. So it's not going to come out as boldly as the little part where it's just the meat. But that concludes our swimsuit bottoms for our smaller character, a more athletic character. And in the next one, we're going to look at just basically going up the sizes. So hopefully this is helpful to you, and I will see you in the next one.